Ever get that feeling? Like something's watching you, that reality's, a bit more fragile than we think.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, that's where this deep dive takes us.
Yeah.
Straight into the shadowy world of the Global Occult Coalition, the GOC.
Ah, the GOC.
I mean, imagine, like, a global organization. Their whole deal is keeping the things that go bump in the night from, well, ever seeing the light of day.
That's the GOC in a nutshell, a global secretive organization dedicated to basically neutralizing threats most people don't even realize exist.
And you've sent us, well, I hesitate to call it a treasure trove, but a trove nonetheless, of leaked GOC documents.
Right.
We're talking mission reports, internal memos, even equipment specs. And I gotta say, it's chillin' stuff.
It is. It is. And these documents, they actually outline pretty clearly their overall mission. They call it a five-fold plan, actually.
Okay, lay it on us.
Survival, concealment, protection, destruction, and surprisingly, education.
So it's not just fighting monsters, they're fighting to keep the very idea of monsters under wraps.
Precisely. They're so focused on this idea of concealment, keeping the unknown hidden from the public eye.
Makes you wonder why, though. Why so
Yeah.
secretive?
Good question. I guess some things are better left, under the rug. But anyway, this whole thing got me thinking. How does an organization like this even function? With all the secrecy and everything. Well, from what I can tell, incredible organization and a deep, really in-depth understanding of the threats out there. These files, they reveal this whole world, categorized by danger, almost like a color-coded system for the strange and unsettling.
Okay, so creepy crayon colors for the paranormal.
Basically.
All right, so what kind of threats are we talking about? What does the GOC actually worry about?
We're not talking your garden variety vampires and werewolves, We're talking type greens, type reds, type yellows, each one like a unique flavor of weird. And each with the potential to really mess with humanity's understanding of, well, reality.
It's like shattering our perceived reality.
Exactly. And that's what makes them so dangerous.
Okay, so let's break it down. Let's start with those type greens, these reality benders you mentioned. How does the GOC even begin to wrap their heads around something that can, warp the fabric of existence?
Well, they've, over time, I guess, learned to recognize the signs, the phases, I guess you could call them, like the psychological evolution a type green usually goes through.
Okay, so there's a pattern to the weirdness.
Seems like it. You have the denial phase, where they first encounter their abilities and it's all, this can't be happening. Then there's the experimentation phase.
I bet that's when things get messy, right?
Oh, yeah. That's when they start playing with fire, seeing what they can really do. And after that comes stability, or at least a semblance of it.
So they kind of like get a handle on their powers, reach some sort of equilibrium.
You could say that, but that's when things get really dicey in a way.
Dicey how?
Because that's when those lines between godhood and complete madness, they start to blur. And the GOC, they have to make some seriously tough calls.
I can only imagine. Decisions about how to, let's say, neutralize the threat. Right?
Yeah.
Which leads us nicely into those type reds, the regenerators.
Oh, right.
Now, what makes them so different from, your average run-of-the-mill movie monster?
Well, it's like this regeneration. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal.
Yeah.
You have your flawed regenerators. Their bodies, they might heal, but it's all wrong. Flesh replaced by bone, or worse.
That's the stuff of nightmares right there.
Tell me about it. Then you have the ones who heal super fast, but it's not, instant. You can still catch them in that window. But then you have the full regenerators. Those are a whole different ballgame.
Okay, hit me. What makes them so tough?
We're talking regrowing entire limbs, surviving injuries that would kill a normal person, 100 times over. They're practically unkillable.
I'm betting those are the ones where neutralize takes on a whole new meaning for the GOC.
Let's just say the GOC has to get creative. Because when fire and bullets and all that jazz just doesn't cut it, you got to think outside the box.
So you're saying they have, special tactics for these regenerators?
Oh, absolutely. But we can delve into that a little later.
Okay, fair enough. And what about type yellows? What kind of curveballs do shapeshifters throw at an organization like the GOC?
Ah, type yellows. The ever-changing enigma.
Sounds like a headache.
You have no idea. See, the biggest challenge with these guys, it's detection. The GOC files, they actually categorize these polymorphs, as they call them, into different classifications.
So it's not just shapeshifters, there's levels to it.
Exactly, like you got your conditional polymorphs. They only shift under certain specific circumstances.
Give me an example. What kind of circumstances?
Okay, so imagine a full moon,
Right.
or maybe a specific trigger, a sound, a smell, who knows. Imagine tracking a creature that's only a monster on a Tuesday, or when the wind blows from the east.
That's wild. Talk about a logistical nightmare.
You're telling me. But as tricky as those guys are, there are types that are even harder to get a beat on.
Oh, there's more. You said there were other types of shapeshifters, ones that are even harder to track.
Right, right. That's where you get into your unconditional and modeled polymorphs.
Okay, break those down for me. Unconditional versus modeled. What's the difference?
Well, unconditional, they can basically change their appearance whenever they want.
So they could be anyone, anywhere.
Pretty much. Total nightmare if you're trying to contain them. But the really freaky ones, the ones that make you question if anyone is really who they seem, those are the modeled polymorphs.
Wait, you got to tell us more about those. What makes them so different?
Yeah.
So, for lack of a better word, unsettling.
Well, imagine this. Imagine, like, you walk into a room and you think you recognize someone,
Yeah,
but then a glance at their eyes, the way they move, and it's like something's just off.
Chilling.
That's the kind of unsettling feeling these modeled polymorphs evoke. See, they don't just change their form, they mimic specific individuals.
So they could literally be your best friend, your spouse, your own mother.
Exactly. They could infiltrate anywhere, become anyone, and that's what makes them so dangerous. You never know who to trust. But, despite all this chaos, this lurking terror, the GOC, they're surprisingly structured.
Right. It's like we're peeking behind the curtain of reality, getting a glimpse at the monsters hiding in the shadows.
And the GOC, they've built this elaborate organizational structure to combat them. It's actually pretty fascinating.
So they're not just a ragtag bunch of paranormal investigators. They've got a system.
Oh, yeah, a very specific system. The files mention these specialized divisions, each one dedicated to a particular aspect of the paranormal.
Makes sense, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
You wouldn't send a baker after a basilisk.
Right.
Or a butcher after a... Well, you get the idea.
Exactly. You need the right tools for the job. So first up, you've got Finishus Division.
Finishus Division. Sounds a bit formal for dealing with monsters and magic.
Oh, they deal with those all right, but they're your boots on the ground,
Yeah.
dealing with immediate threats. They're like a blend of special forces and paranormal investigators all rolled into one.
Okay, so they're the ones kicking down doors and going toe-to-toe with those creepy crayon-colored entities we talked about.
You got it. They have assessment teams gathering intel, strike teams for direct intervention. These are the men and women facing the unknown head-on. And get this, their training is wild.
What do you mean?
It's like a blend of conventional warfare tactics alongside this deep dive into, esoteric knowledge,
So they're equally comfortable wielding a gun and reciting an ancient incantation.
Something like that, yeah. Sometimes you need more than just, a silver bullet. Sometimes you need to understand why silver works at all,
Tap into that ancient wisdom. Fight fire with fire.
Exactly.
Which I'm guessing is where PICE Division comes in. Those are the mind masters, right?
Right.
Keeping the paranormal on lockdown, but in the realm of information.
You got it. Information control is their game, combating what they call memetics.
Memetics, like internet memes.
No, not quite. Think of them as ideas, concepts, images even, that spread like viruses, and potentially just as dangerous as any physical entity, maybe even more so.
Okay. I'm intrigued, but also a little terrified. What kind of ideas are we talking about here?
Imagine a concept, an image, so fundamentally disturbing, so reality-bending, that just encountering it could, shatter your mind. PICE, they're there to contain that kind of threat.
So they're like the internet guardians of reality, making sure we don't accidentally stumble upon some mind-braiding truth.
In a nutshell, yeah. They manage the flow of information, keeping those dangerous ideas under wraps.
So PICE is like a firewall for the human mind, protecting us from ideas that could, break reality as we know it.
That's one way to put it.
That's both incredible and incredibly terrifying.
It really is. But, information control is just one aspect of their work. They also delve into countermemetics, which is kind of like, developing mental vaccines against dangerous ideas.
Okay, so they're not just playing defense. They're fighting back with their own brand of mind-bending weirdness.
That's the GOC for you. Always one step ahead.
So we've got physics for brawn, PICE for brains. What about the folks who operate in the shadows? The ones gathering intel, Always a step ahead of the game.
Ah, you're talking about Pneuma Division. The
Right.
spies, the infiltrators, the ones who make sure the GOC never sees a threat coming.
So they're like the occult equivalent of like intelligence agencies.
Exactly. They monitor global events, both mundane and paranormal, always looking for patterns, anomalies, anything that could hint at a potential threat. Think of them as like occult intelligence agents, always working to neutralize threats before they even happen.
That's some next level proactive action right there.
You know, keeping the world safe from the shadows.
It's a lot of responsibility, keeping the world safe from things most people don't even know exist. You mentioned there was one more division, though, right? One that's even more secretive than the others. The break glass in case of apocalypse division, as you put it.
Pangaea Division. Even mentioning their names sends chills down my spine.
What can you tell us about them? What makes them so different, so secretive?
To be honest, the files are pretty vague on specifics. Their very existence speaks to a terrifying possibility, you know?
Yeah.
That there are threats out there so massive, so world-ending, that the GOC has a contingency plan for when everything goes sideways.
Like a last resort when all else fails.
Exactly. What we do know is that they're highly specialized, operating with clearances and protocols that are, well, above top secret, even within the GOC itself.
Sounds ominous.
It is. They're the ultimate safeguard against the unimaginable, and the things they must know, the things they must be prepared for. It's both awe-inspiring and terrifying.
So we've got the who's who of the GOC, their organizational chart. But what about the how? What kind of tools and tactics do they actually use to combat these threats?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The GOC, they understand that sometimes you need a little more than just brute force, you know?
Right, because what good is a bullet against a ghost or a tank against a telekinetic entity?
Exactly. They've combined cutting-edge technology with a deep, almost intuitive understanding of the esoteric.
So they're not afraid to blend science and, well, magic.
Not at all. They've created an arsenal unlike anything you'd find in a conventional military. We're talking like a fusion of science fiction and ancient lore.
Okay, you've got to give us the details. What kind of gear are we talking about here?
All right, well, let's start with something relatively straightforward. The black suits.
Black suits? Sounds ominous.
Well, they are a standard issue for FHWSS division agents. And trust me, these are no ordinary suits. We're not just talking about, like, bulletproof vests here.
Okay, so what are we talking about?
Imagine, like, tactical armor, right, but with integrated communication systems, augmented reality displays.
Oh.
Basically, everything a field operative needs to navigate a paranormal crisis.
So it's like tactical armor meets, I don't know, James Bond.
Exactly. Stylish and functional. But for situations that require a little more finesse, a less conspicuous approach,
Yeah.
that's where the gray suits come in.
Gray suits. What makes them so special?
Think camouflage technology. But not just any camouflage. I mean, we're talking next level stuff.
Next level how?
We're talking about tech so advanced the wearer can blend seamlessly into any environment. Imagine, like, becoming invisible to the naked eye.
So they have, like, invisibility cloaks. How is that even possible?
The files don't go into the specifics, but it seems the GOC has found a way to, like, bend the rules of perception.
Bending the rules of reality, that's their whole MO, isn't it?
Pretty much. But then, of course, there are those situations where stealth isn't an option. When you need to bring the hammer down on something big and nasty.
Yeah. What happens when subtlety goes out the window? What do they break out the big guns?
For those situations, they've got the white suits.
White suits.
Yeah, these are for when things get really real. Full body armor with enhanced strength, agility, and get this, a built-in invisibility system.
Wait, are you serious? So they've got actual, literal invisibility cloaks.
Seems that way. The files mention something about bending light, manipulating energy fields. It's all very hush-hush.
So they've got their everyday gear, their stealth gear, their, let's call it, things are about to get messy gear. But what about those, end-of-the-world scenarios? What do Pangaea division agents wear into the fire?
Ah, that's when they break out the orange suits. And trust me, you don't want to be on the receiving end of one of these.
Okay, now you're just being cryptic. What are orange suits?
Imagine, like, a walking tank, a one-person army encased in armor that can withstand practically anything.
So like Iron Man, but way more intimidating.
Basically. They call it the ultra-heavy engagement chassis, and it's every bit as intimidating as it sounds. But it's not just about brute force. The orange suits are outfitted with, get this, psychological warfare systems.
So not just a physical weapon, but a mental one too.
Exactly. They can target the mind, exploit fears, sow chaos.
Talk about a tactical advantage.
Oh, absolutely. The GOC doesn't mess around when it comes to these apocalyptic threats.
all this talk of suits and armor, it's impressive, don't get me wrong. But what about those, like, more esoteric tools you mentioned? The stuff that really blurs the line between science and, well, magic.
Oh, right. I almost forgot about those.
You can't just tease us with that and not elaborate.
Right, right. Of course. Well, take Veritas, for example.
Veritas, what's that?
Think of it like it's a system that allows them to detect the life force, the etheric energy field, as they call it, of living beings.
So like a paranormal Geiger counter.
Kind of, but more advanced, way more advanced. It can even see through walls.
No way. So they can track paranormal entities even if they're hiding?
Yep. It's about understanding this unseen world, mapping it, and then using that knowledge, well, to fight back.
Pretty effective, I'd say. And what about sleep, that program we talked about earlier?
Ah, yes, sleep.
Implanting alternate personalities in agents. It's just, I don't know, it raises so many ethical questions.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely one of their more morally ambiguous tools. But the fact that it even exists speaks volumes about how far they're willing to go, to protect humanity.
Right. Yeah, no kidding. It's a reminder that they're fighting a war on a completely different battlefield, one with rules we can barely even comprehend.
Exactly. And sometimes you have to bend the rules to win.
I guess that's one way to put it. Okay, so they've got the tech, they've got the training, but what about weapons? I can't imagine standard issue firearms would be very effective against, a reality-bending type green.
You'd be surprised. They actually use those quite a bit, but they made some modifications.
Modifications? Like what? Give me the good stuff.
Well, let's see. They've got specialized ammunition for every occasion, like your classic silver bullets, right?
Just gotta have the classics.
Right. But then they have these bleep bullets that are filled with these incendiary compounds, apparently super effective against certain flammable entities.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Burn the supernatural with the supernatural.
Exactly. Then there are the black bullets. They have osmium cores.
Osmium. Isn't that like one of the densest elements?
Yep. And apparently it can pierce through all sorts of supernatural defenses.
Handy.
Oh, and then there are the ochre bullets. Those are wild.
What are those? Made of pure gold.
Nope. Even better, cold iron.
Cold iron.
Yeah, iron that's been worked and solded and hammered a bunch of times. It's supposed to be highly toxic to certain types of paranormal beings, especially fey creatures.
Interesting. Never knew there was such a thing as toxic metal.
There's a lot you don't know.
Clearly. The silver, blue, black, ochre. Those are quite the elemental arsenal.
Oh, and I almost forgot. They also have fuchsia bullets.
Fuchsia bullets. Okay, now you're messing with me. What could fuchsia bullets possibly do?
I know, right? Sounds crazy. But I'm being completely serious. These bullets, they're engraved with mystical runes, and they get activated on impact. The effects vary depending on the inscription, obviously, but we're talking binding spells, banishing rituals, even, and I can't stress this enough, manipulating the very fabric of reality.
It's like they've weaponized magic, combined it with modern technology to create, I don't even know what to call it.
It's pretty mind-blowing, right? But, with all this talk about technology and weaponry and, the sheer scale of the GOC, it's easy to forget that there are actual people behind it all.
Right. These aren't faceless robots fighting a secret war. They're people.
Exactly. And according to these files, they come from all walks of life. Soldiers, scientists, artists, even musicians. What unites them is this ability to think differently, to adapt to the unimaginable, and, maintain their composure in the face of, existential dread.
I can't imagine facing down the things they do and maintaining composure. It takes a certain type of person to do that kind of work, to even want to do that kind of work.
That's for sure.
And it takes a certain type of courage to, look into the abyss, to face those things that go bump in the night and say, not tonight.
No doubt. It's a different breed for sure. And the recruitment process, it's like another one of their closely guarded secrets.
So how do they find these people? The ones brave enough, crazy enough, or maybe just dedicated enough to do this work?
Well, these files, they offer little glimpses, like breadcrumbs leading through a dark forest.
Okay, intriguing. Give me an example. What kind of breadcrumbs are we talking about here?
For one, it seems like the GOC, they look for a very specific kind of resilience.
Resilience.
Yeah, like the ability to bounce back from anything.
I guess when you're dealing with the kinds of threats they are, a little resilience goes a long way.
Tell me about it. And it's not just about physical toughness, it's mental too,
Yeah.
Being able to see some crazy reality bending stuff and not completely lose your marbles.
That makes sense. So it's not just hardened soldiers or brilliant scientists they're recruiting.
No, not at all. They need folks who can Improvise. Think outside the box. People who
Yeah.
can adapt to situations that would make even the most seasoned soldier turn tail and run.
It's almost like they're looking for a certain kind of, I don't know, creative problem solving.
Exactly. Because when you're dealing with the unknown, sometimes the best solution is the one nobody's thought of before.
The kind of thinking that could get you laughed out of a normal think tank.
Oh, for sure. But in the GOC, that kind of thinking, that's what keeps the world spinning.
It's both fascinating and a little bit frightening, isn't it?
Definitely both. You know, when you think about it, these folks are training constantly, facing simulations of the worst possible scenarios, delving into ancient texts that would drive most people mad, and they do it all in secret.
A secret society dedicated to protecting the world from itself.
It's a heavy burden to carry, you know? Knowing that there are things out there that defy explanation, defy logic, and they're the ones standing between us and, well, oblivion.
Which brings us back to where we started. These leaked GOC files, this glimpse behind the curtain of reality. It's both unsettling and, in a strange way, reassuring.
Right. Unsettling because it reminds us that, we're not at the top of the food chain, not really. There are things out there far older, far stranger, and far more powerful than we can even imagine. But then there's that reassurance, that sliver of hope, knowing that someone's out there fighting back.
That even in the face of cosmic horror, there are those who choose to stand their ground, to protect humanity from the shadows. It's a heavy thought, a lot to process.
It really is. These files, they're just a fragment, a tiny glimpse into a much larger, much stranger world. And it makes you wonder, what else is out there? What other secrets are hidden in the dark corners of the world?
Secrets we may never know, and maybe, just maybe, that's for the best. But one thing's for sure, after this deep dive into the world of the GOC, I don't think we'll ever look at the world the same way again.
Me neither. And maybe that's the point.
Maybe it is. Well, on that note, to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey into the unknown. Sleep well if you can.
Sweet dreams.